You're listening to Travel Tales with Fergal.
Hello, Fergal O'Keeffe here, and you're very welcome to the podcast. We can't physically travel right now, but there's nothing to stop us armchair travelling when hearing great travel stories. Before we start this week's episode, I want to let you know that we have a special bonus episode out this Thursday. It's a US election special called What's the Matter with America? It's a great chat, very topical and great fun with a Republican and a Democrat, so I highly recommend it. Today we have the Irish sports broadcaster Con Murphy, and I can't wait to share with you his amazing tales, so I'm hopping straight to the interview now. Hi Con, thanks very much for doing this podcast. You've been a broadcaster on television and radio for over 30 years now, 20 years in RTÉ. During that time you did an awful lot of sport. Everybody know you from Sports Sunday. Every Sunday listen to you on the radio, and you would have done an awful lot of travels, I'm sure, going to sports events around the world during that time, wouldn't you?
To be honest with you, I have been blessed. Somebody actually in an article last week described me as a veteran broadcaster, and when you talk about 30 years there, it kind of frightens me almost. But I have been so lucky in that time because one of the things I love doing is traveling, and one of the things about that job is that you do get to travel and you get to see amazing things. When I tell people that I've been to 6 Olympics already, it's not quite I think Jimmy McGee went to 11 or something like that, so I have a bit of catching up to do yet. But to get to go to places, whether it's, Beijing, Sydney, Rio, for what is the biggest sports event every 4 years, it's just amazing. Getting to the World Cup when Ireland were there in 2002 in Japan and Korea. I don't think, as a fan, I would have been able to afford to go on a trip like that because Japan and Korea, well, particularly Japan, was so expensive. But to actually get paid to go to something like that was just incredible. And you get to see places and meet people that you just would never meet in your normal travels. So from that point of view, when people say to me, Jesus, you have a great job, you're so lucky. That's the sort of the icing on the cake in terms of the job, the getting to travel, to see the world. It's just been fantastic.
And am I right in saying, I know that you love travel, that even personally as well as professionally, you enjoy the whole experience?
Yeah, I think I'm one of the strange people who, I love airports. I love going to the airport. If somebody says to me, you're going to have to get to the airport 3 hours before the flight, I actually don't mind that. I love the airport. I love the buzz of an airport. The queues for the security and stuff can be a bit of a pain in the ass sometimes, but in general, I love the vibe at an airport. A lot of people are, going on holidays. They're going somewhere interesting. You get to see all humanity in an airport. And I love flying. I love being on airplanes. And again, there are some people who'd be nervous on a flight, or some people who just don't like being cooped up in an airplane. But for me, I love the whole experience of traveling. So for me, traveling is not a chore and never has been. I think I was about 6, maybe, when I went on my first flight. And in those days, we were going to the Canaries. There weren't flights like there are nowadays where there's a flight every day. In those days, it was like one flight a week, and the flights used to go at 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, because they were chartered planes and stuff. But even then, the excitement as a 6-year-old of getting on an airplane and going off somewhere somewhere completely different to what I was used to, somewhere hot for starters. But even just the smells and the view, everything, being away from Ireland, I loved. And so that's carried on. From a very young age, I've always loved airports, train stations, anything like that. I love traveling.
As much as being there, it's the planning it and the airport and know you're going, and it's a holiday, and as you said, even looking around at other people and wondering where they're going and what their story is, and I love that.
What about when you're traveling with a bunch of kids? Is it a much different experience? Because that's not something that I've had to do. I've had nephews and stuff with me, but I've never had like a bunch of young kids traveling.
Do you know what? It's actually, maybe it's exactly the same but heightened. So the anticipation is multiplied because you're watching the kids' excitement. But I have to say, I love that. It's a bit of work. It's like herding sheep in an airport, trying to keep them together. But once the bags are in, then the excitement is exactly the same, but nearly multiplied. I have to say.
Yeah, I think I was lucky because when I was a kid, apart from the odd, trip to the Canaries or whatever, I used to go to a lot of football matches with my dad when Ireland were playing, say in Wembley or in Amsterdam or Brussels or whatever. So as a young, like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, I was getting to see these cities, and because I was quite young, it wasn't just a trip where we were going to sit in a pub for 2 days and watch the match. Like, we actually did go to places like museums and walk along the canals, and it was a really eye-opening experience. We had one experience in Amsterdam, actually, speaking of walking along the canals, myself and my dad, and I'm about 12 or whatever, and we kind of ramble into the red light district. It was during the day, so it wasn't too bad, but a guy who had been painting our house the previous week was walking towards us, and it was like, how are you, Mr. Murphy? You know, how's things? You know, and it was just funny to meet him in the red light district at 12. But like for any kid, and I think you're right, I think for kids, there is the excitement and the anticipation of traveling, but also there is kind of an educational side to it as well. And like, to get to see Europe.
So tell us your travels when you were with RTÉ. When was your first Olympics?
First one was Atlanta, 1996, the Michelle de Bruyne Olympics, and she won all her medals. And that was, of all of the Olympics that I've been at, that was actually probably the biggest shambles. It was so badly organized. It was really disastrous. Like, our hotel was about 2 miles, I think, from the airport, and they had brought in all these bus drivers from Central America and stuff who didn't know Atlanta at all. So, you know, having flown to Atlanta, you're kind of tired. You just want to get to the hotel, put your bags down. But the drivers got lost. We were driving around for about an hour. I think Jimmy McGee was on a different bus, and he took, I think it was like 2.5 hours to get from the airport to our hotel. What should have taken 10 minutes, you know. And he was like a raging bull when he arrived. It was funny, actually. We flew with Delta Airlines. So had we flown with Aer Lingus, I think, you know, the crew would all know who Jimmy McGee was. He's obviously such a well-known face. But with Delta, it was American crew, and Jimmy on the flight was wearing black trousers and an open black shirt. And he was going around the airplane as he would, you know, chatting with everybody. How are you? Go on, how's it? So when they were coming out with the trolley, for the cabin crew said to him, "Excuse me, Father, can you move away?" They just assumed he was a priest because he was wearing all black. So that he was far from a priest, I can tell you. But that was the Olympics as well, where very sadly the bomb went off outside our broadcasting, and 2 people died. And one of our crew, Michael Slavin, who was covering the show jumping, but he was there when the bomb went off, and everybody who was in the vicinity, he wasn't hurt, thankfully, but everybody who was in the vicinity had to stay there, and they were all questioned by the police. He was kept on a bus overnight while they were going through all the people. And so that was a pretty shocking time. And obviously after that, security was ramped up in the areas around any Olympic cordoned off area, you know. So overall, Atlanta, of all the Olympics I've been at, was probably the worst, just in terms of organization and stuff. But it got better after that. You know, Sydney was amazing, Athens incredible, Beijing, London was a surprise for me how good it was. Actually, I didn't expect it to be as good as it was, and then Rio, amazing place to be as well. So
they're all very different. Does each Olympics has its own flavour?
Yeah, I think it does. I think you're right. It does and it doesn't, in that when you go to an Olympics, generally we don't see a huge amount of what's going on outside of the sports arenas and the broadcast, the IBC, they call it, the International Broadcasting Centre, which is, the IBC for me is always one of the most interesting things in an Olympics, because it's where every radio and television station have their studios and their broadcasting from, in this huge cavernous building. So you'd be in the queue for a cup of coffee, and there'd be somebody from Jamaica in front of you and somebody from China behind you, and Tom Brokaw would be ahead of you, you know, and obviously you'd have all the sports competitors coming in for interviews and stuff. So you'd be walking down the corridor, and Shaquille O'Neal, I remember, walked past me. I remember thinking, he's tall. I think that the difference is just the vibe. Like in London, there was almost like it's almost as if all the volunteers, it was drummed into them that we have to make this the happy games. So, you know, if you were queuing at a bus stop for the buses to bring you to venues, there's always a volunteer there. And they were invariably nice, you know, just incredibly friendly. Where are you from? Oh, you're from Ireland. Have you any competitors going today? They were just chatty and created a nice, friendly vibe, even though obviously the security was very tight and stuff. But even the security people were very friendly, you know. So that was London. Whereas if you compare that to, say, Beijing, where the security people were doing a job, most of them wouldn't have spoken English. So it was just much more functional. There was less of a friendly vibe. Although, having said that, in the hotel in Beijing that we were staying in, all the staff were amazing. And so generally they all try and put on this happy face and try and create a vibe that's happy and positive. In Beijing, they did things like at the side of the road where it would normally be muddy, they sprayed it green so it looked like grass. I mean, they go to those kind of lengths just to paint the place in as positive a way as they can. So yeah, I think there is a different sense and a different feeling from each games. But overall, when I think back of the different games that I've been at, the main thing is that it's just an amazing coming together of the world. And that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love going to the Olympics. You know, I'm a huge fan.
Would you recommend it to people as an event to go to?
100%. 100%. Tickets can be expensive. I mean, for example, Tokyo this year, just the cost of getting there, obviously hotels all bump up their prices. So Tokyo would be a tough one. I mean, even for family of competitors and stuff who all want to be there, trying to get tickets for the events can be very expensive, and then getting there and hotels really expensive. But say, for example, in 4 years' time, Paris, for Irish fans, Paris obviously is very accessible, and I would absolutely recommend, if you get a chance to go along, do it, because you won't regret it. I mean, I kind of forget sometimes how lucky I am that, you know, when I'm doing say in Rio, I was doing commentary on the 100 meters, and there's Usain Bolt down below me, and I'm literally on the finishing line, best seats in the house. When Sonia O'Sullivan won her silver medal in Sydney, I remember standing. Yvonne Judge, the journalist, was with us as well, and I was with Yvonne, and Sonia had just crossed the line to finish second, and we were right on the finishing line, about 8 rows back. I mean, like, better seats than Sebastian Coe was sitting in. And I remember turning around to Yvonne and saying, "This is bloody mad. You know, we're getting paid to be here and to be in the best seats in the house." And for things like, I don't really get opening ceremonies and closing ceremonies. The only one that really absolutely blew me away was in Beijing. I don't know if you remember, the opening ceremony in Beijing was like nothing I have ever seen before or since. It was incredible. But tickets for those, particularly opening and closing events, they can go for like $2,000 each. And I kind of think, there was a couple I left early, I think in Athens. Halfway through it, I just said, I'm going back to the hotel. You know, I don't want to get stuck in the crowds outside afterwards. But having said that, like, to be at an event where an Irish person is competing and in with the chance of a medal, I would say, if you get the chance, absolutely go for it.
I had friends who went, a good few friends who went to London, and the thing they said, you know, they went they might have a ticket for one thing, but then they ended up going to taekwondo or something, and going to sports, which is kind of what everybody does when they're watching it on TV as well, once every 4 years. But they're the things that they really loved, because, you know, they go behind some small country that has someone competing, and they loved it just as much. Yeah. I think that's...
Yeah, I mean, that's... every Olympics I go to, I always go to one sports event that I've never been to before, whether it's like a handball match or beach volleyball, which was great. You know, just some, as you say, whether it's taekwondo, you know, you might go to something like Greco-Roman wrestling, which you'd never watch in a million years otherwise. But it is a great experience, and those tickets tend to be much easier to get, obviously.
And tell us, out of all those Olympics that you've been to, is there So is there an event that pops into your head, something most memorable?
There's a few that will stick in my mind. That night in Sydney, when Sonia won her silver medal, the atmosphere in the stadium that night, I mean, they're great sports fans in Australia and they really know their stuff. And that night, Kathy Freeman was running in the 400 meters and she was the golden girl from Australia. And the buzz and the excitement in the stadium before her race and after her race, that night of track and field was
electric,
like unforgettable. That was something.
And both Kathy and Sonia kind of had the expectation was huge. So when they achieved it, it made it even more special. Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, Kathy Freeman was incredible. And it was kind of memorable because she was wearing that strange outfit so it kind of was quite memorable. But also when she won her medal, I think one of the first things she did was she collected the Aboriginal flag. I think that was a real statement by her as well. Obviously, she was representing Australia, but she was also representing the Aboriginal people, which kind of moved me. I thought that was great. And obviously, then when Sonia won her silver that night as well, that was a night that will always stick in my mind. Other ones, I mean, you've got to say Katie Taylor winning her medal in London. That was incredible. That day was just very special. It was. I mean, she was on a hiding to nothing in a way. If she didn't win, just the expectation was so high. Obviously, again, a bit like Paris, London was such an easy place for Irish fans to get to that they managed to get tickets by hook or by crook. And so it was like there was a football match type atmosphere in the stadium. And because it's a small cavernous indoor stadium, the noise was incredible. I always remember actually that when Katie was fighting, David Cameron was in the row in front of me. Literally, I could pat him on the shoulder and say, "How are you, Dave?" And I was thinking to myself, security obviously is very tight and everybody is checked going in, but I still kind of felt I could have given him a clip on the ear, no problem. Which is why I'm not in jail. But that was another really memorable one. There's a few. I mean, in Rio, being in the stadium watching Usain Bolt, because I remember George Hamilton actually did the commentary on the 100 meters final, and I remember saying to George, this guy is a legend, an absolute legend, and here we are to see him finishing off his Olympic career. And there's been a good few.
For next year, then Tokyo. You were supposed to go this year, weren't you? That was tough.
I was, yeah, and everything was ready to rock and roll, and suddenly COVID came along and knocked it all on the head, which was kind of a bit devastating because I was dying for it to happen. And I'm booked for next year, for next summer. I would be flipping a coin at this point, though, to see whether it happens or not. I have a funny feeling it will go ahead, but I think it could be a situation like we have at the moment where the events go ahead, but the crowds won't be allowed in, or if they are allowed in, they'll be allowed in hugely reduced numbers. So
I saw a clip that you had before you put on your phone from Thomas Barr. Where was that? What event was that at?
That was the final of the 400 meters hurdles in Rio. And again, George being the senior commentator, he was doing any final that involved an Irish person. He was doing that, and he had David Gillick with him as well as co-commentator. So I would have been, after that race, I would have been doing the next race, whatever it was. I actually can't remember what it was. It was at a bit of a loose end. And I thought there was a chance that Barr might get a medal, especially one of the athletes outside him was disqualified. So that was one less competitor to have to beat. So I just thought, I'll record George here. This could be a historic medal for Ireland. And it would be nice for George to have his own copy of this video. So I videoed it on my phone, and obviously it was so close and yet so far, but I just thought I'd pass this video on to George so he'd have it on his phone for time immemorial. But actually the guys back in Dublin heard that I had done this video, and so they used it, I think, in the broadcast later, and I think they actually used it in promos for forthcoming sports events and stuff as well. So it was nice for George to have it, and it was just something I did off the cuff, But
lovely, because you never see that. Do you know what I mean? You captured the excitement of the commentator, because when you hear their voice, you kind of you know, you forget how natural that excitement is. So when you see it, you realize, wow, it
was a good little insight. That excitement is genuine, and I suppose as well, you're kind of caught up by the mood in the stadium. You know, it lifts you as well, which is another reason why, if there's no fans in Tokyo, it'd be a real downer, you know.
I know. You're of course known for doing Monday Night Soccer in RTÉ and lots of soccer broadcasting. Yeah. Would that be your first love, soccer?
Yeah. I think I'd have to say, yeah. And it probably goes back to when I was a kid. You know, I was going to matches from the age of 3 or 4 with Dad. Then as I got a bit older, we started going to matches around Europe and stuff. So yeah, I'm one of the rare breed where I'd be more worried about the League of Ireland than the Premier League in England.
You've been to soccer stadiums all over the world. Is there one that stands out, one or two that you particularly
That's a good question.
Like for football matches now, there must be, you know, like did you go to Nou Camp or?
Yeah, I've been there. I've been to there several times. I've been both in Barcelona for a Barcelona-Real Madrid match, and I've been in Madrid for a Real Madrid-Barcelona match. And they're incredible occasions. And though you're right, those stadiums are just, you know, 90,000 people, the noise. And the thing about those games in Spain is they only allow for the away team, maybe in a stadium of 90,000, there might be 1,000 away fans, maybe 500. So it's totally home team. And it's the same in both, you know, in either way. So it's not one team getting an advantage over the other. The noise in those stadiums for a derby match like that, unbelievable. I mean, the hair would literally stand up on the back of your neck. It's incredible. Those two, actually, you're right. Those two stadiums are amazing. And in terms of atmosphere, another brilliant stadium, if you ever get a chance to go, is in Seville, where Sevilla play. It's a smaller stadium. It's about maybe 50,000, 45,000. But they're maybe the most passionate fans, certainly in Spain. I mean, you might go to Greece or somewhere like that and find more crazy fans. But in terms of passion and noise and intensity in a stadium, that's an amazing.
And Seville is an amazing town, isn't it?
Oh, I would say Seville would be in my top 3 cities in Europe, if not the world. I just think it's incredible. That old air, where the cathedral is, and the little windy streets with the smell of food and people standing outside having a glass of wine. There's a rooftop bar in a hotel right beside that cathedral, actually, and it'd be one of my favorite bars in Europe. I mean, it's just, you know, the Carlsberg ad. It's a bit like that. Like, just everything about the place is beautiful. The setting, the weather, everything, absolutely gorgeous.
I was there 2 years ago with friends from college, so I didn't get to do any of the, you know, like the cathedral and stuff. Yeah. So I'd love to go back. I'd love to go back and do their Cordoba, Granada together as a bunch.
Incredible. That's a beautiful part of the world. One of the things about Seville as well is that the main part of the city is very walkable. Like, you know, it's quite small. So it's not like one of those cities where you have to get a taxi or a tube or something from A to B. Like, you can walk around Seville very easily. And Granada, amazing. You know, the Alhambra is like one of the wonders of the world in a way, you know. So if you do that trip, you have a treat in store.
You love Tenerife.
I love it. I mean, if I won the lottery, I think I'd be spending at least half the year there. You know, just the climate is so good. It's not too hot during the summer. Like, it doesn't get to the kind of meltingly hot that you get in the south of Spain. And during the winter, it's mild. You know, it's a nice place to grow old, I would say.
So, is there any sporting event you haven't been to that you would like to go to?
Ooh, that's a good one. That is a very good one. Can I have a few?
Of course.
I'd love to go to a Super Bowl final just to see I'm not a huge American football fan. I mean, I'd watch it a bit on a Sunday night, but just to see the razzmatazz around the whole thing. I wouldn't be a great aficionado of the game, so once I was in the stadium to sample the atmosphere, that would be part of it. So I think that would be one. I'd love to go to something like the Melbourne Cup. Like, I like horse racing. I've never been to Melbourne. People tell me it's a brilliant city.
The National Day there, you know, the whole city gets involved.
Yeah. And again, it is one that I think probably even the whole country.
You're right. I was in Australia one year. It was Olympics year, and I was in Broome in Western Australia. And for the day of the Melbourne Cup, in the pub, everyone was kind of dressed up and as if it was their town. And this was on the other side of Australia. It was quite amazing.
I'd love to do that. And maybe, I mean, I've never been to a World Cup final. So I think because football is such a big thing for me, I'd love to go to a World Cup final. You know, I've been to some Champions League finals. I was there the night Zidane scored that amazing volley in Hampden Park. That was incredible. But a World Cup final, I think, would be right up there. Probably the top of my list, actually. And the other one, I've never been to Argentina, but I would love to go to Boca Juniors River Plate derby match. You know, again, just having been to Barca against Real Madrid, I kind of think that's almost as big a derby game as you're going to get in Europe. But in South America, I think that one would be, you know, I've seen it on TV a few times. It just looks mad, you know. So I'd love to go to Argentina anyway. So that, I think that would be up there as well. Yeah. I mean, I've traveled a huge amount, and I still kind of think, geez, I've never been to a rugby match. I've never been to New Zealand, actually, but I'd love to go to a rugby match in New Zealand. Not necessarily like Lions or anything like that, just even a club game, because I think that's so much of a part of the fabric of that country.
Again, that year 2000, I went to see New Zealand against Australia in the Olympic Stadium. So it was 110,000 people. So that was the biggest game ever. And I think the score was something like 43-42. Lomu scored in injury time. It was just the most electric atmosphere I was at any game. I did golf as well. So you did the Ryder Cup when it was in Ireland. Would you have done other golf, or do you?
Yeah, I presented the Irish Open golf on RTÉ for a number. I was doing it the day Shane Lowry won his first ever tournament. He was still an amateur back in those days. I still remember that as being the coldest I think I've ever been at any sports event. Whatever way they built our presentation position, it was on the side of the 18th fairway, and the wind there was no doors or walls or anything. We were very open, and the wind just whistled through it was like a wind tunnel. And I remember having about 20 layers on and still freezing, but that was an amazing day. When Shane won, like, from our point of view, the story was brilliant. If you're presenting an Irish Open and there's an Irish player competing near the top, you'll always get much more viewers and stuff. So that was the start of a fairy story for Shane Lowry, and so it was great to be there. The Ryder Cup was a different one in that we were doing on-course commentary for our radio coverage of the event, and so we were out on the course with a pro following a match and stuff, and the access we had, like, we were, you know, Tiger Woods would be taking a putt and he'd literally be 6 feet in front of you, you know. Getting inside the ropes and getting up that close was incredible. It was one of those ones where, because you were so close to the player, but it was radio, so you couldn't stay quiet. You had to say something. So you used to hold a folder up in front of your mouth and kind of whisper, Tiger Woods, 8 feet from the hole, up here, you know. And you were always afraid that you were going to disturb the player, and try and make sure that you were downwind from them, a little techniques like that. But that was great. I mean, it
added to the tension on the radio, the whispering, you know.
Oh God, that was amazing. Again, like, one of those events that you kind of think, geez, I'm going to remember this forever, you know. I remember walking down, I think I was following Darren Clarke's match. Darren was in a position to win it for Europe. We were walking down, again, as I say, inside the ropes, like kind of cheek by jowl with the players walking down. Sergio Garcia was beside me, and his match was over, but he was all excited, a typical Sergio, you know, real having the crack, and it was great. But the noise and the vibe from day one, from, like, as soon as that thing started, I said, Europe are going to win this. You could just feel an energy from the crowd that was very unusual at a golf event. That's the only Ryder Cup I've been to, but I can understand why people who go to it all the time love it so much.
Your partner Lorraine, she works for Lingus, doesn't she? So that's like a golden ticket for someone who loves traveling.
Well, yeah, she does, and I mean, it's very hard work. In fairness to her, they work long hours, and not so quite so much long hours at the moment because of COVID, but hopefully at some point that's going to pass. But yeah, it does. I mean, you have the benefit then of the reduced rate travel and stuff. You'd be on standby, so you're not guaranteed your seat, and there's always that little bit of stress. But it means that getting to places like America becomes much more affordable. And you know, we'd go to America in a normal year probably 5 or 6 times. You know, just fantastic.
So you love it there, obviously, America.
Yeah, I was thinking about places I love to go, and America would be right up there. I mean, just because of the diversity, you know, LA, San Francisco, the West Coast, I love. Las Vegas, go there every year. Palm Springs, just for that warm, beautiful desert heat in the spring and the autumn. It's just an amazing place to go. And then like New York, Boston, Chicago, I could spend a lifetime traveling around America. There's still so much of it I haven't seen. The only thing is, at the moment, because of the guy who's in charge, the president, I wouldn't be a huge fan of his, and so I haven't been going as much. I just don't want to be there while he's in charge. Obviously, COVID has put a stop to that anyway at the moment. But I love America. Yeah,
notice the difference there in the last 3 or 4 years. Then, you know what I mean, with an attitude to people or not, or.
Yeah, I mean, I actually haven't experienced that too much personally, I have to say. I mean, generally when we go there, we'd be in either LA, Las Vegas, East Coast, whatever. So in our trips, which might only be a week long or whatever, it hasn't impacted that much. It's just what I see on CNN. I would hate to be living there at the moment. It's the society looks like it's becoming very, very divided, and it's going to take a long time, I think, for that divide to come back together. Which is, I remember being in LA before the election, about 6 months before the election in 2016, and we were in a shop, and the woman who had this very funky clothes shop in LA was saying that if Trump got in, she was going to leave the country. She just could not bear the thought of living in a country with him as president. And I'd say she wasn't alone. I'd say there were plenty of people who were thinking along those lines as well. Obviously, California would tend to be very democratic and quite liberal. And so somebody like Trump just it wouldn't be popular there at all. As a traveler going to America, I have to admit, it hasn't really impacted on me, other than the fact that when you go through customs in Dublin Airport, there's a picture of Trump up on the wall, and that it's a bad start to any trip.
Exactly. And if you had to pick a city or a place in America as your favorite out of all, because you've been to a lot.
It's really, really, really hard. I think I'd probably, if I won the lottery tomorrow and somebody said you can buy a house in America now, where would you buy? I'd probably go for Santa Monica in LA. It's just beautiful by the sea, great climate, lovely people, great. Just if you go for a walk there, it's just fantastic. It'll be a close one though, Fergal. I mean, I love Vegas. I just love the vibe in Las Vegas, and I know a lot of people say you can only go to Vegas for 3 or 4 days, and you've that's enough. I completely disagree with that. I think there's so much to see there and so much to do. I love San Francisco. New York would get a bit cold for me, but as a place to visit, it's just, again, you know, you could spend 2 weeks in New York and still only, you know, chip the top of the iceberg. There's so much to do and see there. But if push came to shove, I think I'd probably go for LA, just for the vibe, the weather, the food, the walks, the fresh air. Well, it's normally fresh air when the fires aren't burning in the mountains. But it would be a close run thing because, again, Palm Springs, weather there, spring and autumn, absolutely gorgeous. I had an aunt who lived there, and we used to visit her, and that's how we kind of got to know Palm Springs, and we both love it. Absolutely love it. Great restaurants, lovely bars. There's kind of a myth about Palm Springs that it's a place that old people go to.
That's
and I think
into my head.
that would have been the way, you know, a lot of the old movie stars and stuff in LA in the, you know, 30s and 40s and 50s would have gone to Palm Springs because the weather was so good during the winter. But actually it's changed quite a lot. We've noticed a huge change in the 15 or 20 years that we've been going there. It's much younger now, and great selection of bars and restaurants and all that kind of stuff. I should really be working for their tourist board. But it's a great place to be. If you're in that neck of the woods, definitely you should spend a few days there.
The last question is from Emer. So what it is if you close your eyes and take 4 deep breaths, allow yourself to think of your happy place from your travels, and where would that be? A real Emer question.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a very good question. Can I pick 2?
Of course, I did.
Yeah. I think the 2 places I would pick, if I'm closing my eyes, just imagining absolute kind of tranquility and beauty. Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. There's a hotel we stayed in, which was beside the beach, beside the sea, and it's in a kind of a circular bay. And down first thing in the morning, like maybe 8:30 in the morning, just the sun is coming up. The water in the pool is absolutely still. The seawater, which is just over the edge of the pool, absolutely still. The palm trees kind of silhouetted with the sun coming up, and just lying down there, absolute heaven. I mean, I can only describe it as heaven. At that time of the day, there's nobody else down by the pool. I love early mornings anyway for things like sunrises and that. And I can picture that in my mind now. And they used to play this very low-key kind of, I was going to say chill out music, but it's almost like just background music, just very low, not intrusive, but just adding to the atmosphere. That was, I mean, Puerto Vallarta in Mexico is somewhere I'd recommend. We've been 3 times now at this point. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton shot a movie there, Night at the Iguana, and they fell in love with the place so much that they bought a house. They actually bought 2 houses, because when they used to have a row, he'd go to the other house across the road. But it is a beautiful place, Puerto Vallarta.
It's Rick Steen's favorite place too. You know that?
Is it?
Yeah.
That's interesting. And he's a well-traveled man now, I can tell you. So that says something. That's very interesting. We only went there. We were actually in LA, and it was February, and the weather was bad. And we looked at the weather forecast, and the next 3 days it was going to be grey and rainy and a bit cold. And I just said to Lorraine, I don't want to stay around here for 3 days in the rain. You know, you can't even go for a walk. So we literally went out to the airport at LAX, and we went into the building and went up to the guy and said, where can we go that's warm and sunny at the moment? And he said, well, I've had 3 honeymoons in Puerto Vallarta and I love it. So we said, okay, we'll give it a go. And it was only a couple of hours flight from LA. Obviously from Ireland, it's a much longer journey, but it's that picture I have in my mind of that flat, calm water, the sun coming up, the trees, everything, that was heavenly. And the other one, if I could pick 2, would be Bali. We went there about 4 or 5 years ago now. And again, just that early morning feeling of, you know, tranquility, total calm, beautiful beach beside the pool, palm trees, gorgeous place, just beautiful temperature. I think we went there in August, and it was a lovely time of the year to go weather-wise. And Bali, of all the places we've been, I would say, you know, the people were off the scale. They were so nice. It was
spiritual, aren't they? You know?
Oh, gorgeous people. Absolutely. Well, actually, the only thing I would say is once you get past the airport where everybody's trying to get you into their taxi and there's a bit of hustling going on at the airport, I think. Beyond that, in the hotel, on the streets, just everybody was so nice. That's another bit of heaven on earth, I think, you know, and not easy to get to. Quite, you know, it's an expensive trip, but if anybody has the opportunity to go there, I'd so recommend it. Just absolutely.
Did you go to Ubud when you were there?
We did, yeah. The monkeys actually robbed our lunch. We were walking back to the car. It was one of these ones where, that's the other thing about Bali. I think everything is very, very reasonable once you're there. You know, it's very cheap. So we got a guy to drive us around for the day, and you know, it wasn't expensive at all. Lovely guy, real nice, spoke good English, and we were, having gone in and seen all the monkeys in the habitat and stuff, we were walking back to the car with just some stuff for the driver, some sandwiches and, you know, bottle of water and whatever. And as we were walking back to the car, the monkeys literally came out of the trees and grabbed the plastic bag and scarpered. But I mean, speaking of spiritual, I mean, what an amazing place Ubud is, and the
rice paddy fields and
stuff. And we went to the place where they make that coffee from the beans that those animals eat and then poop out. Which, by the way, when you're in Las Vegas, a cup of that coffee costs $80. But in Bali, it's $5. So if you're going to eat the coffee that the beans have been pooped out by the animal,
what does it taste like? I've never had that. It
was very nice, beautiful. Actually, it was lovely. Yeah, and they showed us the process. So the outside of the bean is taken off before the inside is baked and everything. So you're not getting any additional flavors to your coffee apart from the bean. But God, I remember sitting again there having coffee, and you know, you have the layered landscape around you, beautiful mountains and stuff, and thinking, this is as close to heaven on earth as you're going to find. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. You know, really nice.
Thank you. That's a gorgeous way to finish this, and they were amazing travel tales. I really appreciate it, and I love listening to them. I think we could go for another 5 hours if we wanted.
Big time. It's been my pleasure. Thanks a million, Fergal.
I really enjoyed that chat, and we could have gone on for hours more with all these tales. I would ask you to please subscribe so a new episode will appear in your library every week. I would also appreciate if you could leave a rating and review, as it helps others to discover this podcast. Take care and keep dreaming of future travels.
Travel Tales with Fergal.